a few days ago when we were looking at loving awareness. I gave a talk one afternoon about falling in love with aspects of practice, falling in love with this vision and possibility of a free life. So this afternoon, when I was just reflecting a little bit about space and spacious awareness, I thought, oh, maybe the teaching should be about falling into space in conjunction with falling in love. And then I was just kind of reflecting on that notion of the falling into the space, the sort of vertiginous quality, and the way in which that's in some ways a certain accurate reflection, right? That actually we come to really know the spaciousness of awareness. We come to abide spaciously. We come to rest as the space in which everything's happening by falling in somehow, by the usual sense of self, which maintains a sense of discreteness and separation, by that falling away. And there's a certain inertia or resistance to allowing that falling away. It can feel annihilating, because the sense inevitably arises, if I let this just fall away, the sense of the density of this physical experience being me, being my body. If I just let that notion fall away and I just allow the dancing of sensation in space. If I were to allow, this kind of, quite brilliant in a way, but also quite frustrating and boring, this endless inner chatter that's going on. If I would just leave it alone, stop feeding it, stop believing it, stop paying it any attention. If it was to just, like it does, like it has been, and no doubt in some moments, like it certainly has for some of you, if it was just to kind of, like a plant that's not had any water, to start to wither. Not in a permanent sense, of course, but just like we've been saying, momentarily. The usual background noise that keeps reinforcing the sense of me and the sense of world and the sense of time and the sense of place. If that wasn't providing a commentary, if that wasn't reinforcing those reference points, if I couldn't hear my own voice, who would I be? So there is something about a sense sometimes of falling in to a kind of a void or vacuum. What might seem in the moment of falling to be something vertiginous, something annihilating, something existentially risky. It reminded me of Jack Cornfield's lovely image. I say lovely. Sometimes people don't find it lovely at all. In the description, he says our practice is like falling. He says like jumping out of a plane and realizing you have no parachute. And then you realize there's no ground. Sometimes when I've given that image, people audibly gasp in the room. Not at the no parachute bit, which is actually the scary bit. No, they gasp when I say, then no ground. Oh. But that's the good news. No parachute is a problem when the ground is coming very fast up to meet you. No ground, no need for a parachute. No ground, no problem. Just falling through infinite space. And of course, falling still sounds a bit worrisome. But if there's no ground, then there's no difference between falling and flying. Maybe we might be in free fall through infinite space. And still, of course, our usual measuring might be there. Free fall, it sounds a bit alarming. Because we might imagine free fall as kind of, as kind of whizzing. But if there's infinite space, there can be no measurement of speed. Right? Speed has to be relative to something. Speed is relative to ground. No ground, no speed. No difference between movement and stillness. Falling through infinity, no difference between falling and stillness, movement and stillness. So I'd like to offer some reflections on space this afternoon, and the first little bit might sound a little technical because I want to refer to the tradition and some of the terminology. But if you're not familiar with that, please don't worry. There's nothing you need to know or learn or remember about that at all. And the intention and the point of these reflections is not to learn anything, and it's certainly not to um, get into the technicalities. The point and the intention is just to reference direct experience, the possibilities of direct experience, and some of the things I describe might sound a little. They might sound a bit subtle, or a bit esoteric, or a bit arcane, or a bit vast, or a bit cosmic. But I think sometimes it's the framing of these things, and that's what I'll speak about in a minute, that makes them seem, the framing of the depth and the potency of actually just as the naturally spacious nature of consciousness. It's not very subtle, really, but consciousness is spacious. It's not very subtle. It's really obvious. Where are the edges of consciousness? Oh, can't find them. Ah, there you go then. Consciousness is infinitely spacious. Where are the edges of your perception? Where are the edges of hearing? Oh. It's just, the sense is of a kind of expansiveness of our experience that gets sort of more and more diffuse, right? But it doesn't actually have hard edges. Where's the edge of seeing? Where's the edge of hearing? Where's the edge of sensing? Where are the edges of feeling? Where are the edges of this moment? Well, there are no. There are no hard edges. We infer the edges. We say, well, I can only hear to about, I don't know how many 100 meters. But just in the direct intimacy with hearing just actually appears as feels like an infinite realm. And that's what's pointed to in the tradition, is the infinite realms of spaciousness. So here's the technical bit, and it's to do with the jhanas, right? And I'm not going to speak about the jhanas, but I do want to speak about the formless realms, and they often get lumped together in the tradition because of the Abhidharma and the commentarial tradition. So in the Abhidharma and the subsequent commentaries, one gets the Rupa jhana, right? The form jhanas, these sort of four progressive absorption states, which have the form of a certain deepening state of meditation. And then you get the formless jhanas. And the word jhana was never in there in the beginning. The Buddha never used the word jhana. It's not in the texts, at least. So these form, they're actually called ayatana in the tradition, which means sphere or realm or domain. So the arupa ayatana are formless realms. Right? In other words, states of ways of experience, that's saying realms of experience that have no form. Realms of experience where form, solidity, discreteness, this and that, inner and outer, that things existing and not existing, but all that form softens and dissolves. They also, they sort of have a certain progressiveness. I hesitate to use that word because linearity usually doesn't stand up. So they don't need to appear in order in the way that the form jhanas appear in order, and they don't need to be considered as jhanas at all. Jhana, if you're not familiar, as I say, the form jhanas are these four progressive, often called absorption states. And they have form because there's a certain kind of real stability to the mind, and a kind of stability and clarity. And that stability and clarity that's found in the jhanas is great. It's good to have stability and clarity of mind. And some of you have practiced with the jhana, some of you have particular facility for jhana. You might recognize, the stability and clarity that comes from that kind of absorption state is helpful. And if we want to look at the formless realms of experience, then nothing wrong with having some stability and clarity of mind. Really helpful. But the jhanas are not necessary conditions for entering, we could say, the formless realms, or tasting the formless realms, or falling through the formless realms, or dissolving into the formless realms, or knowing the essential nature of our own consciousness as this infinite formlessness. So, of course, there's some difference between lineages and traditions around how these things are taught. But the essential point I want to make is to separate out the formless realms from the form jhanas, and certainly to separate any idea out of the kind of progressive 9, first 4 form jhanas, then the second 4 formless jhanas, and then Nirodha, and as if that is some kind of, linear pathway. It is taught sometimes like that, particularly where the Abhidharma is strong in the Burmese lineages, but it's not taught like that in other traditions, and it absolutely needn't go together.